Hey there berries, welcome to a Guild Wars 2 returning player my kind of experiences video. I'm sure that's not going to be the title, but if you don't know who I am, my name is Bizzleberry. I primarily make League of Legends content, but if you have been following my content for some time, you know that I am heavily into MMORPGs. It's actually how I met my wife now, my now wife. She's still with me. Back in World of Warcraft, I've played Old School RuneScape, World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy 14. Used to play Guild Wars 2. I actually played it with my wife when it got released, and a whole range of other MMORPGs like Rift and Aeon and New World and Lost Ark and God knows what other else random MMOs. Especially when I was a kid, I used to play those random Eastern MMORPGs that when you look back at them you wonder how you even had any enjoyment out of that whatsoever. But now the last times should I say, there's been 3 times in the past I've played Guild Wars 2. When the game got released, I played it roughly for around about 1 to 2 months. I rage quit at the end of the base storyline, so we got some minor spoilers here if you haven't played Guild Wars 2. I wasn't happy with the ending of the storyline. Without saying too much, with the airship and the cannons, I thought it was actually the most tilting kind of ending to a base game, to like a storyline content in an MMORPG that I've ever played.
There's no way. There's no way.
It was so bad that it actually made me quite angry, how that storyline ended, when you just literally just go onto the airship and just right click a cannon for a few times. Yeah, I've been getting angry thinking about it again. And then so I quit. Also, there wasn't really much end game content or any end game content. There was no strikes, that's what they're kind of known as now, the dungeons. There was PvP, there was World v World. I got myself involved in quite a bit of that. I was one of the first people to get kind of like a commander icon, so I could have my own little Zerg running around the map. So those were kind of like fond memories of Guild Wars 2 back in the day. Was actually World v World stuff. But yeah, as I said, there wasn't any PvE content to do, and it was quite when I'm playing MMOs, I quite like my PvE content, and if there's like nothing really to do apart from like farming mobs for gold, which was, I was then at the time converting them into diamonds, and I managed to get like a lot of bag space. So if you don't know, in Guild Wars you can basically earn the in-game currency, so gold in this case, and you can convert that into a paid currency called diamonds, and you can use those diamonds to buy things like expansion packs, stories. You've got bag slots that you can buy, character slots, those kind of things, and some other convenience items, which I'll briefly talk about a little bit later on. So that's what I was kind of doing at the time, and I just kind of like, what's the point? So I quit, and then they brought out the Heart of Thorns expansion. Got my wife to play it because she really enjoyed playing Guild Wars at the time, like as a proper casual player, like doing the jumping puzzles and things like that. We both hated Hearts of Thorns, and there's 2 main reasons for that. So the first reason, as someone who has played lots of other MMORPGs, myself in particular didn't understand the point of playing the game when there is no vertical progression in item gear, really. So at the time I had like 4 exotics, I want to say. Now there's ascended gear, which is like slightly better, but generally, like if you had 4 exotic gear, that gear would like last you, still does, forever. So if you were playing like when the game was released, like was it like 13 years ago? I can't remember when it got released. That gear is still viable for a lot of like content in the game. So that gear never actually goes to waste, which has its positives and some minor negatives. I think at the time for me it was a bigger negative because I couldn't wrap my head around, well, I'm not really making my character stronger, so why am I playing through this? It doesn't really feel like a point in doing that. And especially at the time in my youth, I was a much more like hardcore player, so I felt I needed to be more rewarded for the amount of time that I was putting in, and part of that reward for me was like feeling like my character was going to get stronger. And then the other reason was just that the map was just, for me, was just horrible to navigate around. I didn't realize that a lot of people stopped playing around about Heart of Thorns as well because they just didn't like the expansion. I've come across people that have liked Heart of Thorns expansion, but for me, myself, I absolutely hated it, and I kept getting lost, I remember, and the layering wasn't very clear, if I remember correctly, of where to be and all that kind of stuff. So that expansion itself really kind of frustrated me. I think I quit it halfway through, and at some point, I don't remember when, apparently I came back and I finished the expansion, Heart of Thorns. So when I've returned after about 10 years since I last played Heart of Thorns, I thankfully didn't have to do that expansion again or have to relive it. And so that kind of brings me to now. So 2 weeks ago, I have picked up Guild Wars 2, mainly because a couple of members of my community have played it. Well, looking to play it again. And I was like, you know what? I was like, yes, okay, right, MMO time. But yeah, I completely forgot about Guild Wars 2 until people started playing it on the Discord. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I'll give it a go. So what's the first thing I do when I log in? I go, okay, I've actually completed Heart of Thorns. Okay, so what's next? So the next expansion is Path of Fire. And I see that there's some other expansions there as well, and some things called stories. And it's all a little bit confusing in terms of how things are explained in terms of the shop. And I kind of wish I knew more about what I was getting myself into in terms of what expansion things and stories and what I would be missing out on if I were not to buy stories. So if you are uninformed, right now in the shop there is a bundle. So you can buy Guild Wars 2 base game now is free, but you need to pay for content, which is fine. So you can do that with real life money, or you can do what I mentioned earlier, where you can convert your gold into diamonds, and you can use those diamonds in game to buy things like the stories. They have bundles on the page. The bundle was Heart of Thorns, Path of Fire, and End of Dragons. So I was like, okay, well, I'll pick up the bundle. I think it was around about 40-ish pounds. So about £20 new expansion pack for me, because I'd already owned Heart of Thorns, and from what I can tell, there was no discount from already owning Heart of Thorns, which I thought was kind of a little bit sucky. I would have appreciated having a discount on the bundle like you usually do when you buy like a bundle from Steam and you already own one of the games, and it's like, okay, well, here, have 10% off or something. I thought that would have been a nice gesture, but nope. So they give you a code for, Heart of Thorns, Path of Fire, and End of Dragons. But because I already own Heart of Thorns, and in theory I should have like 2 copies of Heart of Thorns, so in theory I feel like I should be at least be able to have, that extra copy of Heart of Thorns and to give that to someone. But that's not the case either. It just seems to just vanish into thin air. So a little bit disappointed about that. But, whatever. Jumping back into the game for the first time in ages, dropping like about £40. That's fine. I want to experience some new content. It's been a while since I played, like over 10 years. Now, playing through Path of Fire, I found the story okay. I think overall it was around about a 6.5 out of 10. Now, usually I'm quite harsh with my reviewing, so 6.5 is like, it's fine. It depends on like what kind of reviews. If you watch like IGN or something like that, 6.5 is like abysmal. But 6.5 for me is like, it's fine. It's like it's an okay story, vaguely interesting. I was coming back into it, so I don't really remember a lot of the previous characters. I barely remembered my own character. But the overall story felt, without spoiling it too much for people, you're up against the fire god. You meet a couple of dragons along the way. I felt like the story overall felt rather rushed in Path of Fire. Like I was kind of interested, but not really interested enough, because I felt like the interactions between your character and Balthazar were kind of... I think if you had already been playing the game consistently before then, it would have made a lot more sense. Like if I played the story again from base, then maybe going to Heart of Thorns and then going to Path of Fire, rather than just jumping back into Path of Fire, I think my score would have gone up. So this is like a personal rating, right? So there's an instance where you go and see events that have happened leading up to it, and it's kind of like making your character remember what's happened, and that was kind of cool in terms of seeing it happen. And I can appreciate, if you were playing at the time, how it would be nice to see those events that you've already kind of done and happened kind of like come to life again in front of your eyes. But as I said, I couldn't really appreciate that because I haven't been playing the game for over 10 years. But overall, I felt like the story was rushed. I don't like the fact that it feels like the green star, which is like the quest marker for the main story, the distance between, you know, you completing that event and then it's like the next green star is literally on the opposite side of the map. And you know, you have the option to, you know, explore the map, which I love doing. I love exploring the map and going for the vistas and things like that. But there's also a thing at the back of my head. It's like, you know, I've got to try and not get too distracted and get through the story, because not only because I've got to, you know, do the story and there's a bunch more story to kind of get through as well. I just don't like that green marker on the map when just like there, and it's a bit distracting. So having to traverse across the whole map, potentially skipping some side stuff as well in order to get to that point. I felt like it was trying to rush you through the zones. Would have been nice to maybe have some intermittent markers dotted around. And if I remember correctly, I had to backtrack for the Jackal mount because the story doesn't lead you to one of the mounts. So I had to kind of like research a little bit and go, how do I get to this mount? And it was like a really awkward way in order to get the Jackal mount as well, this weird like bit of wall that I had to kind of like float up and get to. Felt really awkward, that whole bit. So yeah, overall I felt like the zones in the Path of Fire were, you know, quite fleshed out. There were some interesting areas. I like the ghost area as well, with the massive kind of like I wanted to say that kind of cathedral, but it's like underground, isn't it? It's like it's where all the ghosts hang out. I thought that area was quite cool, and the story with that was quite cool too, and how they get involved later on, also in Living World Season 4. I thought the ending of Path of Fire was a little bit confusing, especially with the Lightning Dragon. I had like no idea who Kralkatorrik was at the time, so that was a bit overwhelming. I thought like the boss fight at the end, I thought was okay. I felt like it was a little bit all over the place in terms of mechanics and things like that. I'm not a fan of using another item in order to complete a big encounter. I'd rather use my own weapons. So in that encounter, you have to use the sword that gets given to you, which I didn't like from the story. I preferred to use my own equipment, but each their own. I guess if you have been playing your character for a really long time. Yeah, so there were some like minor gripes there, but the ending of that story, of that expansion, I should say, sorry, was a lot better than I thought then, like the Tyria, the baseline, and overall I enjoyed it a lot more than Heart of Thorns. But this is where like my main complaint comes into, is the confusing nature of the seasons. So when I completed Path of Fire, it was like there were some questions unanswered, which I thought was going to go straight into Ender Dragons. But that's not the case. There's a thing called Living World Season 4, which goes straight after Path of Fire, and then it goes into Living World Season 4. So if you're uninformed, it's kind of like the equivalent of post-patch for some expansions. So you buy the expansion, and then over time, the company releases content more to do with that expansion, which usually unveils more and more of the story. I didn't realize I would be missing out on story content to do with that expansion until I completed Path of Fire. And I was like, well, there's a lot of questions here unanswered with, you know, this lightning dragon that's now a big threat. And for me, story-wise, it would seem really weird to go, okay, now this area is about to get absolutely nuked by like lightning stuff if we don't help. Either that or just abandon them and go straight to Ender Dragons and just pretend it doesn't exist. Like, to me, that was quite jarring. And I wasn't expecting to then have to pay an additional amount on top of the expansion in order to basically essentially complete the expansion story. I understand that if you were playing it at the time, the content was free. But it feels weird to me coming into the game where, as a new or returning player, the game's like, well, you paid for the expansion. We're going to give you 50% of the story. But if you want the other 50%, you're going to have to give us essentially around about, I think it's on sale at the moment. I did pick up on sale 20% off, but I think it's like around about 1,200 gems. So that's, you know, like an extra £10 essentially in order to finish the story. And I thought that was a little bit cheeky. I personally would much prefer to have the bundle increase in price by like a little bit for the Living World story season 4 to be included in that, to make it so it's a whole package of actually proper Path of Fire season 4. I think as a new or returning player, especially if you played other MMOs, I think that's a really confusing system in order to do that. I understand that Guild Wars 2 needs to make money because they have no monthly subscription. So unlike World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy 14, where you're paying around about £10 a month in order to have the privilege to play the game, they're acting that as a subscription model on top. But what I will say is, if you are a new player and you're wanting to experience the Guild Wars 2 story fully, like from the base game all the way to the end, you're looking at spending a lot of money up front in order to experience that, to the point where it's actually more expensive to play Guild Wars 2 initially. So for like the first couple of years, it's actually more expensive if you want to experience the whole story of Guild Wars 2 to actually pick up the expansions, pick up the stories, the seasons, and experience all of that content, rather than picking up something like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy 14 and then paying that monthly subscription for like a year. Like, let's just say like it takes you a year to get through Guild Wars 2, all of that story content, of all of that money that you just spent. You're probably looking, you know, at the same time, I think there's probably roughly about the same amount of story content in both like World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy 14, as someone who has played both. World of Warcraft is a little bit more different because their story is so messed up now at the point where I don't think anyone's really paying much attention to that, whereas Final Fantasy 14 story, you have to kind of like play from the very beginning and then progress the story chapter by chapter. You go through every single expansion, non-optional, in order to experience the whole length of the story. I think on the flip side, people will say, well, you don't have to do that. You don't have to experience the story in Guild Wars 2 in order. You can kind of like pick and choose of what you want to do. But as someone who wants to experience the story, I think it would be very jarring, especially when you've like paid for Path of Fire and you're only getting like essentially 50%. Honestly, in this case, it feels like less than 50% of the content. It feels like Living World Season 4 has more content overall than Path of Fire. It feels very odd that you're paying for that expansion and you're only getting a chunk of it, and then it's like saying, well, you know, you need to pay this extra chunk in order to actually get the full experience of this expansion that you've paid for. I don't know how that doesn't really settle too well with me. So yeah, it's just a very awkward system, and I think they have kind of acknowledged and addressed that in future content, because that's like the Living World Season 4 is like the last Season 4. Then you've got the Ice Brood Saga, which I hate. Why do you guys call it IBS, man? It's horrible. Please don't call it that. And then that's like the last like story that should be like season 5, but they don't call it season 5. And then you got Ender Dragons, which seems to be one expansion package. Secrets of the Obscure, which is one package, and then Jonathan Wilds, which seems to be one package. I don't think there's any extra story on top of that you have to pay for. I could be wrong. I haven't got there yet. I've currently just started IBS. So yeah, I think at some point I probably will have to go back and pick up Living World Season 3 and Living World Season 2, which will cost me another 2,000 gems, so whatever that is in actual currency. And I still need to pick up Secrets of the Obscure and Jonathan Wilds expansions. So I still need to drop another, essentially around about, let's just say like £60 in order to get the full amount of the story. And just to kind of like try and wrap that up, like compared to like World of Warcraft, for example, if you wanted the whole story now, you basically just pick up the current expansion now and then pay the monthly subscription. So you would have full access for everything for about £45, £50. You would have access to everything. That includes like the monthly subscription. And then after that, you then would have to then pay £10 a month. Another counter argument also, I want to leave this topic as well, that people will say will be like, well, you can spend your in-game money, convert that into gems, and then get the content for free. You know, you have to spend your own time gathering the materials, blah, 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 to sell and make money, but you can essentially get it for free. I don't like calling it for free because you still have to spend your real life kind of like time playing the game, and then that becomes like potentially like a job or whatever, but get it for free. But you can also do that the same in WoW for free with WoW tokens and things like that. And you know, I don't really want to get into the argument of you can buy these things for free and stuff, because yes, you can, but at the same time, it's like most people, the majority of people, I feel like will be buying it with real life money. Now, the actual story itself, Living World Season 4. So I did rate Path of Fire, I think it was 6.5 out of 10. Living World Season 4, I am so happy about that. I think that Living World Season 4, even though they were cheeky to ask an extra £10, £8.50 or whatever it was in order to pay for that season, I think has the best story out of any MMORPG that I've played, and that includes Final Fantasy XIV, which is meant to be like, you know, won loads of awards and renowned to have like, you know, the best MMORPG story out of all MMOs. There is a lot of comedy in Season 4. There's a couple of twists and turns, unexpected moments. I think the stuff with Joko is fantastic. I think the stuff with Kraukatorek is a little bit less interesting for me. But I thought still they did a general good job. I think where Season 4 kind of lets it go a tiny bit, and the main reason, even though it is the best story in any MMO, I feel like the zones themselves are kind of apart from maybe the very last zone. I thought the very last zone was pretty. But yeah, I think Living World Season 4 did a really good job. So if you don't know, again, like not only does you get access to more story, but they're actually they release more zones. I think there's 6 extra zones in Season 4, whereas I believe in Path of Fire there was only 3 zones. So you're getting access to an extra 6 zones. I will say that the extra zones, a lot of the extra zones don't feel as fleshed out as the Path of Fire expansion. And I definitely came across more bugs, even still now, after that got released after such a long time. Season 4 definitely had some weird bugs. I don't think I have any actual footage of a couple of them, but I remember like one of them was you're working with a robot to put a tracker on a thing and trying my best not to spoil anything, and there was like an achievement where you got to protect this robot, and if they doesn't take any damage then you get the achievement. No mob spawned, so that was the easiest achievement I think I've ever had. There's like some weird goofy things like that that have happened in Season 4, But overall, I felt like the story was the main real highlight out of it. Thought the zones were kind of okay. Also, once again, with Season 4, you're unlocking new mounts, which I haven't got yet. In terms of the beetle mount, I need to work on trying getting that. Is there any other kind of mount things that are unlocked with that? You get like an extra tree, I think, with the Crystal Champion, which you get a little bit more quality of life when you're using mounts, so you give them more energy and things like that. But so you do miss out on content which can be used in other content by not picking up the Season 4 as well. So you do miss out if you don't actually pick up these things. So maybe there's a little bit of FOMO there, but it is what it is, unfortunately. I think overall I'd give Living World Season 4 like a 9 out of 10. Just purely because the story was so good. I think if the story was another kind of meh, I think it probably would have been bet down to like maybe a 6.5 to a 7. I do enjoy traversing the world and things like that. I am enjoying using the mounts that you do get from Path of Fire. It's annoying seeing people flying around and stuff like that, but I know at some point I'll unlock that. I think it's from like Secrets of the Obscure. Apparently I'll get some sort of flying mount or something like that, or maybe from Ender Dragons, I'm not sure, but I'll get there when I get there. But using the mounts is pretty fun, but it also has the issue that like World of Warcraft has, for example, where Blizzard had to do like a whole map overhaul of their base area of Azeroth, which is like Tyria, and how mounts kind of break terrain. Recently I went back to do 100% map exploration, and there were like a couple of jumping puzzles I needed to get points of interest for, and I could just use my rabbit mount to jump really high and just get it. And it felt a bit like cheating, but it's like, you know, I guess at this point it's old content. I did a lot of pot jumping puzzles legitimately back in the day. But yeah, I think going back into that kind of old world and being able to use your mounts and stuff like that is quite funny. Seeing how that older content, especially like the environmental things that they try and put in place, get completely broken with the introduction of mounts. But overall, I've been really enjoying coming back. I think one of the really big pluses of Guild Wars 2, I've been streaming it a lot this last couple of weeks, is actually the community. Everyone really kind of wants to help. Sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming when people want to help. But overall, everyone's in a really positive mood about the game. I haven't really heard anyone like, you know, be negative about the game. The people that are still playing it are positive. They want to help people. I feel like the community wants to try and bring people coming back into Guild Wars 2. There's a lot of people that I've spoken to are coming back to playing Guild Wars 2, like myself. There's a few people in my community. I think 2 of the people that stopped around about the same time as me and coming back into the game are around about the same mark as me, so we're around about the same area in the campaign. Someone else stopped near the ends of Secrets of the Obscure, so I think they've got Janthea Wilds to play through. And even yesterday I was speaking to someone, one of my long-term viewers, that they picked up Guild Wars 2 and they're playing through it, and they're a little bit overwhelmed as you are when you're playing MMOs, but they're you know, there's people playing Guild Wars 2, and I kind of forgot honestly how still popular it is compared to some of the other MMORPGs. Like, obviously it's not as big as something like World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2, not as popular as World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy 14 or old school RuneScape, but I feel like it's it's like the next one down, like 4th, 5th in that kind of area, particularly in the PC world. I think there's probably contenders could be like Elder Scrolls Online maybe, or Albion Online. There's a couple of other games that are around probably the same kind of player count as Guild Wars 2, but you know, Guild Wars 2 I still feel like has healthy prospects, especially when I believe there's meant to be another expansion coming out at the in October 2025. So yeah, that's my kind of like initial thoughts on it. There's some of the things I've been really enjoying coming back in is the combat. I've been enjoying playing the combat. I've only playing one character right now. I'm playing a thief, got the Daredevil staff. I'm like jumping around a bit like Wukong in any game involving Wukong. Actually, it's not just League. I was going to say League of Legends, but Wukong is not just only tied to League. So I'm jumping around with my staff, bonking heads. I haven't really got any stealth actually in my build, but yeah, I'm just dashing around and bonking people on the head with my staff. But yeah, overall, I think if you are looking for an MMORPG, particularly a bit more in terms of casual, I can highly recommend it. But what I will say is, and the big warning is that you will have to pay an upfront cost potentially to playing Guild Wars. So if you wanted to experience the story from point A to all the way to the end, you're looking at a big upfront cost. You know, the positive side is there is no monthly subscription fee, but you will have to buy the bundles, the expansions, in order to experience that content. I think ideally, apparently there are sales that happen on expansions and things like that. Try and pick them up on sale. So for example, if you were going to get into Guild Wars and you're enjoying the game and you were going to play more, pick up the triple bundle of like the Heart of Thorns, the Path of Fire, and the End of Dragons, and then don't buy the other expansions unless you see them on sale. Or do your research and you can actually choose to pick up like the latest expansion, for example, Janfear Wilds, straight away, and just go into that and play that straight away. But just be aware, obviously, there's going to be a lot of story and characters and things like that that you might be skipping through. There might be spoilers as well that might come up there as well. So if you really care about the story, then you probably should play through A to B while also picking up the seasons in between that as well. I haven't played the previous seasons. I have heard that season 4 is the best storyline out of the entire game. I have heard that the season 1 story is kind of so I don't know. You might have to do your own research in terms of like what kind of content that you want to pick up with your money. Season 1, I believe, is free, and then you have to pay for 2, 3, 4, and 5, and the 5 one is just called the Icebrood Saga. So if you're really story driven, if you like playing like Final Fantasy 14 and you love the story in that, then you're probably going to want to go through A to Z on that. If you're someone who kind of just wants to have convenience, doesn't really care too much about MMO stories and just wants to play the game, then yeah, try and find out what expansions give you the most convenience, what ones give you the mounts. I think it's Secrets of the Obscure that gives you like a flying mount quite early on, I believe. I might be wrong. So that could be an idea to pick that one up, and then once you've maybe completed that, then move on to other elements of the game. Yeah, so far I've been really enjoying it. As I said, I've only been playing like for about 14 to 20 days. Probably racked in round about, say, 80 hours maybe during that time. So I've been playing quite a bit while doing other things. But yeah, thumbs up for me. I know a lot of it was probably kind of on the edge to negative kind of things. But overall, the negatives, as long as you're not worried about the payment things, overall I've been really enjoying playing the game. And as I said, the community is the big thing. The chilled environment in terms of like, you know, the exploration. I love going for the vistas. There's loads of achievement hunting to go for if that's what you like. There's loads of achievements to go through. Even through the story, there are achievements and there's reasons to backtrack to complete achievements if you want to do that. Go for like 100% completion in that regard. The voice acting, even when the story has been kind of the voice actors in this game have honestly the best voice acting also in any MMO, better than Final Fantasy 14. There are a couple of instances where semi-main character voices get used for generic NPCs. I think that's might be my only issue with that. But overall, the quality of the voice acting has been very high. I've been very impressed. Yeah, the flow of the combat's really good. I was also surprised at how lively the world is. There are probably like a couple of zones in the game where I was like some of the smaller zones. I was kind of like, okay, this zone's a little bit dead. There's no one around. But there's definitely been zones. I was doing some stuff yesterday with some of the events in one of the older zones interior. I think it was in the Shattered Sands, I think it was called. So many people, like 40, 50 people running around doing the meta events and stuff like that. And you know, even in some of the Path of Fire stuff, there was people with like the little commander emblem on the map, so you could see kind of like what was going on, what events people were doing. And yeah, the world felt really lively still, so I was really happy with that. I did dabble in some PvP. There was a PvP rush event this week. I think getting back into PvP, especially after not playing for 10 years, is a very overwhelming thing. I definitely don't have the proper build that I should probably be using, but still managed to get some W's playing with some members of my community on stream. You know, we were all useless, to be honest. I think we're all fresh and new to the game, or just bad at PvP, but we still managed to get some wins. It's kind of fun, just running in, just doing your thing, whacking your buttons down, sometimes getting one shot, and then sometimes feeling invincible because someone's giving you like a crap ton of survival buffs. A lot of the PvP matches, there's either like the equivalent if you play like World of Warcraft, where it's like kind of a Rafi Basin-esque, where you have to hold points. It's like 3 points. You get points for holding more of the points, the areas. And then they had this weird kind of like League of Legends-esque mode where there were 2 lanes and you had to get supplies to spawn minions to go down the line to attack the enemy. Is it like the enemy nexus, but like the enemy lord? That mode was kind of very strange to work out how to play that for the first couple of games, but after playing it a couple of times, I actually got quite into it and I quite enjoyed it. So I probably will end up dabbling myself into a bit more PvP and experimenting with stuff. I haven't even touched World v World yet, and that was something that I used to do a lot back in the day, so I'll have to investigate that. So I'll probably do some sort of like after playing for a month update maybe or something, and give you guys an update of how I'm doing in some of the content. But right now, just started chapter 1 of the Icebreed Saga. Will say, so far the story hasn't quite gripped me yet. I have been warned that IBS is challenging, but I'm trying to ignore that right now. I don't want to get into a bad mental kind of like state of a story when I haven't even experienced it yet. So I'm going to try and enjoy it, try and see if we can discover what that story is all about and enjoy it, and then after that for me it would be the next expansion, End of Dragons. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed my little talk. All the best, take care, and I hope your Guild War 2 adventures also go well. Bye bye.